with regards to like the spread of English amongst the world. And since that's like the predominantly like language that blacks speak, I feel as though could one say that Afrikaners are at a disadvantage since like most of the world is everybody's forced to speak English in order for you to be in the business world. So therefore, by default, outside forces outside of Africa, South Africa are forcing individuals to have to speak this language and maybe change their culture in a way.
Well, and then you could say not just Afrikaners, you know, all South Africans are at a disadvantage. And, you know, if all universities are public universities that have the same interest to educate so that, you know, the country can have the right skilled people and all of that, why is it that the focus should be on a particular subsection of society or not? And should the responsibility be that of universities to maintain the Afrikaans culture and language, or should that be that of, you know, the society and families? You know, where I come from, it is the responsibility of my parents and me on my nephews and nieces to make sure that even though they go to English schools, we speak Setswana to them.
Very true.
Because what does that say to them? It lives out to them value system within our families that yes, you are being educated formally in English, but you do not forget who you are and where you come from. And part of who you are and where you come from shouldn't solely be and heavily be the responsibility of government through government entities like schools and colleges, and forced in the manner that it has been, and in some instances it is. First and foremost, families need to own up to that responsibilities. And that's another challenge that we face as South Africans in our families, that, you know, because I look at my sister and my aunts, you know, their children are now at a point where they're in high school, or, you know, their grandchildren need to be, a selection of school needs to be made. And of course, everybody wants the best for their child. And where are the best schools? They're not in the townships, many of them, they're in the burbs, in white neighborhoods, and those are white schools where you are lucky if Sizulu is taught as a language, and if it is taught, what quality is that Sizulu that your child is being learned? So to completely transfer that responsibility to schools and colleges, you know, for me, I don't think it's right, and especially for black families now in South Africa, where the tension exists. You know, oh, my child goes to a private school, so I need to speak English to her so that her English is good, and of course that's important. But your child also needs to be able to communicate with grandma and grandpa who are living in rural South Africa who do not speak. Your child also, as part of her heritage and culture, needs to be able to speak her mother tongue, which could be isiZulu. And how do you manage that and balance that? Because it is a serious, real tension. You get young kids, black kids in South Africa who cannot speak their mother tongue.
There's such a strong parallel there, because I was part of an ESL program back in the States, and it's very, very prevalent within the Latino community. When we come to the United States, it's almost like you lose your culture because you try to conform to society. And I've seen issues where even children who were raised in their own country now learn English, don't know how to speak Spanish, and can't even communicate with their own parents anymore. So it's kind of like all that tradition is gone.
Yeah, so the tension that is there. And I mean, the South African, and I'm sure you get it now, you know, in this brief conversation and your time in Johannesburg, that one, you know, as students from the US, the parallels that can be drawn between the US and South Africa, right? Very present, very real, and you will find that on most of our campuses, the relationship with our counterparts with American universities dates back to many, many years. And we still learn a lot from each other. You know, that there are certainly successes that are different in both our nations. But also, I hope you also get that the South African story is so complex.
Yeah, it is very complex.
It is so complex, and the consistent, message that government, with all their flaws, and I'm the first to admit how much my government fails me often, on a daily basis, with all the successes that they've achieved, but because our issues are so real, and one is almost impatient. But government consistently, makes and talks about the challenges and how we all as South Africans need to do our bit. That we can't be all just looking to government and say, we have a problem, you come up with the solutions. Of course they need to take the lead, but it is up to me and my neighbors, me and my friends, me and my church, me and my birding club, me and my soccer club, that in our different constituencies, we need to, for real, sit back and reflect and say, this is who we are, this is where we come from, this is where we are. What do we want for the nation to be like, for life to be like in the future, and for all of us to play a part? And we're not there yet, Of course, it's different when you have the majority of the nation living in abject poverty and all they care about is bread on the table and milk to eat now. But if those of us who are active in the economy and have been granted a privilege of understanding the complexity of our nation from a different perspective, if just us could begin to play our part in small little ways, we would be and can be very far in as far as social cohesion and reconciliation and a better life for all South Africans that we all want at the end of the day.
Right.
I just have one quick question about it. And what does, so there's a forced integration, I'm sorry. There
You
is
can
this,
use
this
the word forced integration, it's
at
okay.
the higher ed level, but what does integration look like at the K to 12 realm?
Pretty much similar.
So then there are students from the white or from the white community then going into the townships and forced to study in township schools.
Not really. Because, why do you think?
Yeah, because they don't want to.
They don't want to. The average school, the schools in the townships are all public government schools. So there's every degree of abject poverty, no resources, to some schools that have some resources and still, produce high quality learners. My colleague's child who is now living in Dampina, even if she knows that exposure to her child is important and critical, if you weigh the two, school in the town that's got better resources than a school in the township,
so there's this agenda, but there's no real funding put behind.
Well, it is there. You need to remember that we have a serious backlog. It's been 20 years. Apartheid was in place for many, 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 many years. And while it is a reality and some white South Africans don't want to hear it, the effects of apartheid will be with us for a very, very long time. So, resources and money is being pumped into areas where it should go, if we just focus on education, for instance, to improve. But the problem is so enormous and was so systematically good that in 20 years' time, you've only just about made that much of an impact. It's going to take many, many other generations. Now, of course, it does not help that even then, with the problem being that enormous, that there are corrupt government officials that use the funds for something else. But, be that as it may, we're dealing with quite enormous institutionalized systematic system that will take a long time, and purely because other sectors of society, well, not purely, but because other sectors of society have not come on board to work with government and others to make sure that we collectively address this.
I just wanted to ask about, well, I guess in two ways, the role of counseling and therapy. And so even before students can come and approach a counselor, how large is the academic field of counseling, and who's enrolling, and what role does it play at this university? Because I could imagine that this professional field is one that could be said to be very useful considering the situation. And then what role does that play on college campuses when you have these students from both sides coming into the same space who, you know, they may want to change for themselves, as we've mentioned, but then they still have to overcome their family backgrounds and all that they've been taught up into university. So when they decide that they want to make this change, who can they talk to? And just, what role does counseling?
Very important question. Counseling critical. And the funny thing is, you know, it's easier, and will be easier certainly for the average white student to go for counseling session than it would be for black students, especially males. So, you know, on our campus we have a student counseling and development unit that offers. Come in. Is the campus tour about to begin?
CT, they're here.
They're early. We're almost finished.
Okay.
It's supposed to be a campus tour first before the city tour. What time is it?
It's 10 past 10.
Okay, according to this program, the city tour is supposed to start at 11:15, but we're almost done.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Irene.
Thank you.
So counseling very critical on campuses, in communities, you know, the social services collectively, because it's serious issues and people have been hurt and people are still living through the pain, you know, that has been there on both sides.
Right.
I mean, you know, we still have in our society people from police service and the military and government who were in the forefront of making sure that apartheid remains. And now they find themselves in this present day South Africa with all its flaws and all its successes, and they have to do life normal, and it's not easy. So social services in its entirety, very important. So we have a student counseling and development unit on our campus that does counseling for a variety of challenges, from personal to academic, to family therapy, and it's a service that is free to all our students. If you're a registered student, you get that service for free. They also work with practitioners off campus. Staff members have what we call a health and wellness unit, which focuses on staff, because, you know, we too as adults have got our own issues that we need to deal with in order for us to take the next step forward. But like I started when I was beginning to answer your question, amongst black communities, it's still, you know, kind of a taboo, especially for males, to seek psychosocial help. It's improving, you know, with younger people certainly, but it's, I mean, we had a student and who was actually not even South African, he was an international student and had gone through a terrible incident on campus. We, you know, worked with a counselor director of the unit to identify a counselor that will take him through this. He was from Ghana, and he missed the first three. I mean, he went through a terrible traumatic incident, and he just couldn't pitch for the first 3 sessions. They were scheduled. He just didn't go. And of course, you know, me working with diverse people and the exposure and the training that I've had, I had anticipated that happening, but did not even mention it. And when it, you know, when the counselor called and said to me, Danelle, you know, it's session, we into the early stages of the session, and he has already not pitched up. And I said to him, you know what? We need to find an innovative way of how you pull him into your trust and all of that. So, you know, for some of our students and some of our staff, it means that black counselors need to be there, right? Because at least they will have a better understanding of how to navigate some of these, who can speak the language. Because yes, we're all adults, and by the time you come to university, we should all be fluent in English, but there's certain emotions that you can only best describe in your mother tongue. And if we don't have black counselors that can either speak Sesotho or understand Tswana or whatever the language, that could be a challenge too. And we're fortunate enough that, you know, the counselors that we have are fairly diverse and have been well trained, and have been trained at various institutions. So they employ and apply different therapy models when they engage with our students and staff. I quickly just want to say to, I mean, you know I'm not going to be on campus, but these conversations will continue, and don't just continue it with me. You are in spaces and will be amongst other students and staff, so take the conversations forward. But I just want to quickly just flag to you on your program that you should have emergency numbers to call if you need to be in contact with any of us in case of emergency. The one number that I'd like for you to memorize is the campus security number, which is a landline number, and they are on campus. And while we will trust and hope and pray that, you know, nothing traumatic is going to happen, you know, one cannot predict life. You know, be conscious of where you are. Certainly enjoy the campus, but it's winter, it gets late, dark very early, and don't wander around on campus by yourselves. Thugs and criminals become cleverer by the day, and one, you know, it's the beginning of a new semester. There are a lot of new students who are out of country, and you know, you become almost an obvious target, so to speak. So I do want to ask you to be aware and conscious. Don't do anything silly that you wouldn't do at home, like walking to Pick and Pay by yourself in the middle of the night. Rather call and ask for help, or somebody to, you know, if you're at the library, you need to go back to Protea, which is on the other side of campus, you know, call security and tell them, I'm leaving the library now, I don't see any other students to walk with, can somebody come and accompany me from one point to the other on campus?
Is that the same, that's the emergency number?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. The emergency number might be an 0800 number or 0861, and then campus security might be a 05. But either of those, if you call the emergency, you're going to end up at campus security if you call. So both, there are two numbers that will lead you to one point.
Are those the ones in the back of their ID cards?
Yes.
I have them if you guys want them.
Yeah.
I'll pass them around.
So yeah, and don't leave your, you know, your laptops and stuff on your desk when you go out for the day, especially if you're on the ground floor. People break windows and they access them. If it needs to be charged, you know, for the day while you're out, try and cover it with something, and don't make it obvious that there's an iPad there that's lying around, or a computer, because it, you know, even if somebody was just passing by virtue of them seeing it, it's an opportunity to try and devise some means on how to get through to your room and get it. Make sure you lock your rooms and stuff like that.
Are there phones that can be used?
Yes, so when you walk around campus, whenever they're going to take you on the campus tour, because now I've been told it's a city tour, but anyway, you will notice there are red poles on campus, and they're in very strategic areas, and those red poles have got telephones in them. So when you pick up the phone, it automatically dials with our campus security office, and you're able to say, you know, I'm in need of help, this is where I am. So as you walk during the day, you know, try and spot them on a route that looks familiar. So those are the security phones that we have on campus. You don't need to put money or anything. You just pick it up and it dials for emergency help. That will be, and you know, security is quite visible. They patrol the campus continuously. In the evenings and also during the day, but especially in the evenings, they wear green and very bright yellow and orange bulbs. And they have a navy and blue uniform if they're not wearing the bulbs, and it will say UFS security. They have their name tags. So you'll see them in buildings and across campus, and they all have direct, immediate contact with the main security campus on campus. If you need any help of any nature,